good afternoon. This is Dmitry Sitkovetsky, and this is my program, Transformation, Art of Reinvention in the Time of the Pandemic. I'm delighted to have my wonderful and friend of many decades since our school in Moscow, which we will talk very, very soon. A wonderful Elena Bashkirova, who's a solo pianist, wonderful chamber musician, and also director of a wonderful festival in Jerusalem. We will talk about all of that and more. Welcome, Lenочка.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to see you, Dima.
Great to have you. We go back really, really long time when we were I was of course older, but anyway, was not such a big difference in classes. I remember those years in Central Music School must have been still the height of that system, because I remember in your class or around your class, there were names like Pletnyov, Gavrilov, Pogorelych, Feldsman, Farmer. I mean, phenomenal pianists.
It was they were around. I mean, in my class, actually, in my, let's say, my year, that was Pogorelych.
Yeah.
And the many others who are, let's say, maybe will not so famous, but there are a lot of wonderful musicians who are now playing all over the world. It was a fantastic school. I don't know whether we are it is an idealization of the past, but I think it was a fantastic school, and it was a fantastic music education. Not only music, it was a fantastic education at the time, at least at the time. I'm happy to have been there. Yes.
Absolutely, because we learned also so much about, I remember my wonderful history teacher. I remember even geography. I love geography.
Absolutely.
I went to most places.
We went to all of places in the lessons. But you know what, I remember, there were some clever people. They were clever, these good teachers. They were wonderful. They gave us this wonderful general education. And also they understood that we were there mainly for music. And therefore, they didn't sit on us, didn't expect from us to be geniuses in physics and something like this. They were, it was wonderful. They gave us as much as they could, but we were not obliged to have a great notes in mathematics or physics. But some of the people were talented for this. I wasn't.
Exactly. And later on changed, and then they could enter other.
Absolutely.
There were clearly the math wizards or some sports or anything. They got. I don't think I've never seen a school of that type anywhere. Because I remember vaguely, but I remember playing for Menuhin in '64 when he came, and he modeled his school in Cobham here near London, where Sasha Sitkovetsky went later on.
Oh, yeah, Sasha.
He modeled after Central School, but of course, it was a much more. I mean, they all lived together, so like a dormitory, and they stay. But of course, the level of general education was very different. So you, of course, come not unlike me, from a family of very, very distinguished musicians. Of course, your father, who unfortunately just passed away recently, he was one of the most fantastic Russian pianists, and later on, great pedagogue with great influence that he had. So tell me, how was it growing up in the family of Bashkirov household?
It was fun, I think. Now, going and looking back, it was always fun, and it was wonderful. First of all, he was probably unique in his way. His character was such, he could really separate the musical, let's say, the part and the private part. So he could have been very unhappy with me at the lesson, and he made me understand it. And I was tremendously miserable. 10 minutes later, he was storming into my room and saying, "Lena, come, let's go and have tea, let's go. There's some interesting program." And then we spoke about anything but the miserable lesson that I just had. So, but that was not put on. That was natural for him. Here was the music, and he was,
genuine.
he was genuinely sort of able to separate this one from the other. It was really fantastic. So he was not much there. Let's say he traveled, and it was always fun. He came. Thanks to him, I knew all the museums of the West, because he always brought with himself enormous amount of this beautiful, huge albums, thick like this. He must have been, 30 kilos. Also, he brought for me all the, pop and rock records, which I asked him to buy, because, it was very important for me. In my class, we had a rock band, and I sang, and so we had to have the information, and he brought all this. So this is just a joke. But really, there are a lot of culture, a lot of also excitement and love for culture, not only for music, of course, for music also, but for everything, for the beauty, for the, let's say, this excitement about the beauty, about the pictures, about the literature and everything. All this I somehow got at home. I had my mother was my mother was a violinist. She worked in orchestras, so from this side I also got a lot of interesting information and all this. And my grandmother, from my mother's mother, she was a pianist, and she was a very good pianist. And she, so I had all my, let's say, a lot of culture I got from grandmother. She was avid reader. She read, I don't know, I think she read everything what was written, especially what the classical literature. And so actually my first Dickens or whatever it is, Maupassant, Balzac, and Tolstoy, whatever it is, I got it from my grandmother. And I don't remember even some of the things. I don't remember. Did I read it actually, or was it my grandmother who told me? Because she told me everything in such incredible details that when I then read the things, I recognized them. Yes, I knew everything, every character, every situation. She was marvelous, and she always, all her life, studied French language. She was born.
Yes, tell me about the French connection. That's interesting, because you ended up living part of your life in Paris. I remember that.
Yeah, and so she was the one.
She was the one who put that. Besides what I knew, of course, is mostly about your father. I knew much less about your mother, but your grandmother and the whole atmosphere of great culture and appetite for culture. That's important.
Absolutely.
What was different, of course, between you and me, that my mother never gave me any lessons. Later on, we started playing, but there was never. I just learned from observing, from being under the piano and from nothing.
But he didn't want to teach me. He didn't want to teach me at all. He said, because I was a lazy pupil, I didn't care very much. I had so many other interests. And he said, no, I have no interest in you as a pupil, because you don't work. But then the life turned out in such a way that I suddenly, he had to take me, and he gave me just, under the condition that you work properly and you leave all these other interests. I was theater, and I was painting, and I was doing this and that. He says, you now concentration on piano. If in 1 year you didn't make a progress, then goodbye. So I took this challenge, and in this 1 year, after not only 1 year, in 1 week, I was already making progress, because he sort of, he was fantastic like this here.
He made an ultimatum for you.
And he was right.
But officially, you studied. Who were your teachers? Because I don't remember who you studied. There were some wonderful teachers at Central Music School. Who were your teachers?
Central Music School, the first teacher was Timakin. Timakin was a very wonderful teacher. He was also a teacher of Mikhail Pletnev and Pogorelych and Katya Novitskaya, Felsman. They were all his pupils. Only he was not for me, unfortunately, because he was for the serious people. And I was, as I tell you, I liked my life, and I was no good. And I realized, I know. And then he left for a couple of years to Yugoslavia. to teach. And I was transferred to another teacher whose name was Eleonora Bogdanovna Museilan. And she was a wonderful woman, fantastic and great psychologist. She understood my psychology. So she already started bringing me up to loving what I was doing. This was the most important thing, to make me love it. And she did. Well, then she didn't stay there. She left, she retired early. And then that's where my father came in. I was 16 and then I was without teacher.
I see. What because Eleonora Bogdanovna, I remember very well because I was good friends with her son.
With Seriously,
and since her son played the piano, she knew how to handle another child who is growing up of a great pianist. So she was much more of a as you said, her psychology was right for you. Yeah, she knew where not to push too much or not to expect, miracles right away. That's the problem of many children, and I'm sure you have now a situation with your son who is a musician and who is not only your son but also Daniel Barenboim's son. That's pretty
that's,
mission impossible to follow.
It's okay, but I mean, we have two boys. One of them didn't want to be like parents, but he's still a musician. He's a producer. He does pop music, and he's in his world, but he is a creative musician and composer. So interesting what he does. And the other one has absolutely no problems about being son of anybody. And he at some point made a very good statement when yet for the 100th time somebody said to me how it is to be a son of such famous person. And he said, well, I don't have any chance to compare. So it was right.
That's very good. Yeah.
That's good, yeah. He's cool about it. Yeah. He's cool. He just knows that he has to do as good as he can himself. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing very well.
And of course, in Central Music School, we had not just children, we also had grandchildren. There was Shostakovich grandson, David Oistrak's grandson, and so forth. So we had dynasties.
Yes,
and then of course, when we left, it continued. The Nina Kogan, whose birthday actually today. Oh. So if she's watching,
if you're watching hello Nina, I remember so well. We had wonderful times. Can I tell you a funny story about my son?
Any story?
This funny story is, how also the children get sometimes to like what they are doing. We came to Berlin in 92. He was playing a little bit of piano, and we couldn't find a piano teacher in Berlin, believe it or not, for the children. It's difficult. Now maybe I could find, but no, at the time there was nobody that we could find for the kid. So we said, let's try violin. There were a few people that we knew, good teachers for young children, and we went to one of them. One must say, you probably remember it from your, not from your childhood, but from being young parents. At some point at the time, all children all over the planet were excited and crazy about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I remember that.
Remember? Those turtles, Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, and they were, of course, fighting the bad, the rat, and so, I don't know. In the end, most important thing was that at the end, there was a culmination and happy end, and they ate pizza. The pizza became children's most favorite food. All over the world, children were eating pizza because of Ninja Turtles. They ate it in any case, but Ninja Turtles, it was the top. So I went with him to the teacher. And the teacher said to him, oh, Misha, look, this is a violin. You see, this is a violin. It has 5 strings. And here is a bow. But we are not going to use the bow now. We are going to make pizzicato. Now, he looked at me. He gave me like this. He said, pizza. And
Well,
from
that's fun.
this moment, he was at ease with the idea.
That is a great story.
Story.
Pizzicato.
Pizzicato.
Oh,
And that's why I think he owns his career to pizza.
to ninja. Yeah. I
Ninja
remember he
turtles.
I think it was at some point Misha Seckler's wife was his teacher, wasn't she? Early on, teaching him violin. Was she not?
Who?
Mikhail Seckler.
No. Well, she was a very good friend of my mother. And she sort of, she gave him some advice and, yeah.
Yeah. But she wasn't his, that was not her who said the pizza.
Not his real teacher. No, she didn't. Pizza.
Yeah.
That was...
I never thought of pizzicato in terms of pizza, but from now on, of course.
From now on, each time you are going to
pizzicato. That's fantastic story.
Yes. So
listen, you started, of course, early on. You traveled the world a great deal, playing, sonata recitals and this and that, and you met great and good and everything. But what were the most, of course, your spouses do not count, aside from Daniel and Gidon. Who were sort of the most startling, most interesting personalities that you either performed with or were the sort of the big influential musicians in your life or personalities?
Look, I was really lucky, as you rightly say. Of course, I have been in touch and closely in touch with such giants. So I always look for somebody who is at least as good. When I do the music, chamber music, I love to play with people from whom I can, for example, learn something. It is not always, but there is always something. And with the conductors, it's very difficult, of course, but sometimes I was lucky to work with Sergiu Celibidache. I was really lucky. He invited me twice to play with him, and both times, of course, it was amazing. Especially the first time, where he asked me to play for him, because I was always with Daniel, and he asked me, so what? Why don't you play for me? I said, Maestro, please, here you have just leave me alone. No, I want to hear you. So he heard me and he liked it, and he said, I want to play with you. And he gave me a chance to play with him in München. And it was a piece that I never played, Symphonic Variations of Franck, which is a beautiful piece, wonderful. And in the end, it was an absolutely marvelous concert, I remember, which I always remember. I learned tremendously from him. He worked with me over 2 years, and hours and hours. He would come, because he didn't have a piano himself in Paris, and he worked with me on 8 bars. But those 8 bars was so important, everything, which connections, harmonies, what it goes where it comes from, and so on, to such a detailed and so much reflections, so much to think about it. I'm really grateful to him about it. I really lived a fantastic experience with him, and then playing with him, and then later he invited me to play with him again. And so I really lucky girl, because there are very few people who played with him. He was a giant. It was really amazing. And I played and also, I had a, yeah.
You go ahead. Yeah.
No, but this was probably of a musical experience of a special kind, I will never forget it. And he taught me a lot. And then, I also love to play with singers. And among the singers, I was also lucky to play with some really great people. For example, I made a lot of concerts and a lot of programs with Robert Hall. You know him, of course. And, this is somebody, he's not the most famous, what you call star nowadays, but this is a man who taught me, really so much about the lead. And through lead, taught me also about the music of every composer, whether it was Schubert or Beethoven, or whether it was, for example, Hugo Wolf, or even Russian music, You know, it's so interesting that we've done. And then I, for example, did one absolutely marvelous experience with Anna Netrebko. She really, it was fantastic. We did a Russian program with her, and I don't tell you that it's not only that, of course I enjoyed it, but I had a feeling of being swept away and taken on a special trip. And from that moment, she instilled in me the love, for example, for Tchaikovsky, which I never had before. I got so inside this. She's extraordinary artist. There's something about her, you know, musically. This instinct is her, the beauty and the sort of the intensity with which she does this. It taught me a lot. So basically, I want to learn, you know, and I think I wish all of my colleagues would have this idea to continue learning always from somebody, to have somebody to learn from. Well, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky because I always have something to learn.
But I think you also, it's not only luck, because you were always ready to receive. You were ready to absorb all of that, and you never stop learning. And for those who are that attuned, I think good things come, because you do send out, you know, wide-eyed as you were young, you know, ready to receive. You were not complex. You never thought that, you know, yeah, you were, I remember you wide-eyed, and you know, and you were ready. You did not assume that I am somebody, you know, who wants to give something
I didn't
to
know,
somebody
because
who knows already everything, that, you know, will not get.
this is
But
terrible to
we
know everything. Nobody knows everything. No, but
nobody does.
this, I think this is basically, it's a wonderful thing. I know, for example, look, my husband, Daniel, he all the time, each time he does something, it's always new, always learning on. And this is how we keep ourselves basically alive, because, you know, to know everything is not possible. And if you are not interested, then why do it? Why doing this?
And I think for the young people, maybe now in the pandemic, especially, you know, before the pandemic, all the incredibly busy artists, the ones that never stop, like your husband or some of the others who are always so busy 5 years ahead and so forth. It seems to the others, you know, to the young ones, that there's no chance they will have any time spent with them. But it's not true, because actually the great masters, they always love to give, and they're ready. It's just that it seems like there is this big wall or all kinds of people around that will not let you in, and this and that. And I think in the pandemic, maybe I experience a lot more accessibility, because I never really taught. This time, for the last year, I've given more lessons than ever. I coached chamber music. I coached, you know, concert violinists, and not only violinists, conductors, and so forth. I think people realize that now that we have the time, maybe it's okay to approach, you know, because before it was always on the road and this and that. But now they realize that, and I know my colleagues, our mutual friends, like Tony Papan, he's done a lot of projects that normally
I've seen it.
have the time. He wouldn't have the time. And so I hope that's a good lesson to learn in all of that, that we all are a lot more approachable, and we love giving and passing on. We don't have to have positions like professor of this whole
No.
As I joked with Stephen Isserlis, who was one of my guests, I said, Stephen, you're like me. You don't belong to any, you know, any institution, any school or anything. I said, you probably have the same philosophy like Groucho Marx, which I often quote. I said, I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member.
That's true. Yeah. No, but it's true. You know, I think once you have an experience and you are a lucky person, which I think you too, and I too, we were lucky to have this childhood. We were lucky to have this education and actually a good life. And I'm now touching wood. It's piano. No, but you know that life was nice to us, you know, and I think we owe it to give what we know. Is each one whatever he can, you know. Some people can do more, some people can do less, some people are more talented for teaching, but I think it's now the only most important thing, because there is, let's say, public education, there is none. So it is each one of us which can do something and give something and explain or talk basic things, but also to make people love music. You know, there's this now, but this is another theme. It's enormous kind of a, people don't know. I mean, normal. So the people who are not known public, they're not a classical public. They don't know what classical music is. It's in a kind of a corner, and that for elite and something like this, it's kind of rubbish. Total rubbish. So to make people love it again, and you don't have to be a musicologist to love it. You have to be able just to open your ears and enjoy it, and it gives you everything. Who am I? Everybody knows it, how important the music is for the development of the human being of us, you know, to the children, for the young people. So, you know, this is what we can do.
And I think we have, this is more important in many ways than to have another, 100 concerts of, the repertoire that we've done. I mean, I've done so many concerts in my life and tours, and you did too, but to pass on that real, the importance, what music really
it's a flame
to us.
It's a flame that you have to pass on. Yeah, this is
exactly
one of our duty nowadays. Absolutely.
Exactly right. I have that theory, and I'm sure you're talking about the same thing, that in the olden days, when there were tribes, of early primitive people, you would think that the most important was the bravest and the strongest man who killed the most mammons, to have food. No, or it must be then the wife, the woman who gave the most children. So no, the most important person was the keeper of the flame, because if the fire went out, they all died.
It was a woman usually.
Exactly, of course. And so I feel, I consider myself and people who are on the same wavelength, that we're the keepers of the flame. And we have to make sure that flame passed on to the next generation and to the generation after that. And that's exactly what you were just saying. So speaking of passing the flame, you've made, of course, we met a number of the festivals in the 80s. There was a big boom of artist-led festivals. There was Looking House, there was Kuchmo even before, and then there was My Festival, and so forth. But then later, you made one in Jerusalem, which is now what, 20 years at least, or more than
22. The last I don't count, but 22, 23. I think we started in 98.
98. So more than 20 years. Fantastic. Talk about that. How did it happen, and how it goes on?
Well, it's a beautiful story. It was started out of nothing, out of a just casual conversation with a few colleagues. There were some musicians, some musicologists, some journalists whom I met at one of the occasions of the concert, where I didn't play myself, but it was one of the big celebrations of the Israel Philharmonic. And they spoke to me, and knowing that, that I go to this festival or to that festival, they started they went at me and said, something has to be done for this city, Jerusalem. It's suffering a lot because used to be, let's say, cradle of all civilization, which is true. Now it is really kind of forgotten, and there is not much going on there. One has to make some event or festival where the people would come to Jerusalem. And I agreed from the very beginning, but I said, why do you talk to me? I am not from here. I never lived there. I don't speak Hebrew. And I don't know what's going on here. No, it has to be somebody from outside, because there are too many people inside. Of course, each one has his own agenda. At this day, there was a triple concerto by Beethoven, played by Perlman, Misha Maisky, and Fima Bronfman, with Zubin conducting. So after the concert, during the triple concerto, I must say, this thought was started turning in my brain, and I went after the concert, and I went to them and I said, well, how about that? And I spoke to Misha, to Fimo, whom I know, of course, with Russian speakers and all this. We sort of, what if we do something like this? Of course, there is no money. And it is, for none of you, it is a big career step, nothing. It's just for people here, because I think they have such a tough life in this city. You know, it is always so much tension, religious, political, security, everything. It's really not difficult. It's difficult for them. And the culture goes away. They go either to Tel Aviv or they just immigrate. They go away. So one has to maybe, well, how about create something where people would go for these people, for this, oh, yes, wonderful. And you know, just having these two yeses, I could call them the whole world, you know, and everybody said, wonderful idea. I never expected to do it, but within 1 week, I had a most wonderful cast, let's say, you know, like this, you know, of musicians for the 2 years after. And it was easy. It was tremendous. And we started doing this. And yes, the public of Jerusalem came. And we were so happy. And there we will, you know, there's also one of these points that in the first years, it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then we had to move to a bigger place. And it is wonderful. It is YMCA. It's a fantastic hall. You've played there. And it's just fantastic to see the people. I must also say, unfortunately, in the last years, there's a huge generation of people which is not there anymore. We lost some public. We didn't gain a lot of young public, unfortunately. This, I don't know how it can be done there, because again, I don't live there, and I think there are maybe means, but I think it should be also the people of certain age. This is people who have time. So, but the people of certain age at the time, in the late 90s and beginning of the century, that was still Europeans of the generation of the, some of them survivors of the Holocaust, but some of them of this generation, which you call in German Kulturträger. These were people with enormous culture who knew this music, who knew it, and they, and of enormous curiosity. This was amazing for me, because remember, we tried also a lot of contemporary music, always asking, you know, always making a new piece, you know, and commissioning pieces, and playing a lot of contemporary music, far from easy for them. And I remember that sometimes, oh my goodness, so much of the contemporary music, and will it be okay? But yes, it was not only okay, but some of these very old people would come and say, you know, it's difficult, what this music is difficult, but it's exciting, and you know, we want to learn. That was the greatest compliment that I could get. It brings tears to my eyes, because the later, already now, you know, about 15 years later, I can hear, oh, why do we have to have this modern music? We want our Brahms and we want our Mozart. Fine, I love Mozart and I love Brahms and everything, but it is a completely different mentality. The next old generation is not the same, and I don't want to complain about it. Of course, we will play for them, and I will continue doing this amount, some, you know, contemporary music, but I see it's becoming more difficult. It's becoming more difficult.
I think it's a general problem, I think, of everywhere. And if it's a problem in Israel, where there's so many, you know, still musically connected in active or passive point, you know, because there's so many Russian speakers, and most Russian speakers had an exposure to music, maybe not to such an extent as you and I, but it is still, there were much, you know, as I always give an example that, let's say, you know, the names of Prokofiev and Shostakovich in Russia at the time when they were alive, if you stop anyone on the street, they knew exactly who
they knew, of course,
because they also wrote not only big form of symphonies and oratories, but they wrote film music, Shostakovich theater music, and songs. They knew from films and everything. So there was no big division between.
There was no separation between classical and popular.
Exactly.
But this is now, it is much more. Everything is in sort of in its own. Here you have this, and here you have only this, and here you have only Baroque people. Here you have only contemporary music, and here so. But It's not good.
Yeah,
We have to be able to recreate programs and things like this, where one plays from everything, that one can connect it in some interesting way. But I think musician also, in many ways, a good musician has to be interested, at least, in all this, and have some ideas about it, trying to play it all good. I don't like specialists of anything,
no,
specialists.
no, absolutely not. And for this, I think what's fantastic, the program I saw with Daniel just last summer in the middle of pandemic, and what a great idea he had. Well, of course, no
commissioning 10 composers. Yes.
So, tell about this, because
that was great, because exactly, when started first lockdown last year, middle of March, everything stopped, and he had this idea to, instead of just sit around, to make what was possible. It was possible. He together, they worked a lot with Emmanuel Payou also together, and he commissioned through the Boulez Salle and through his foundation, they commissioned 10 composers. Nobody did it for money. This is what is interesting, because was the only way to do it. Wonderful composers. Some of them are really famous, some young, but some really what's now the creme of the composers. Each one created a piece for chamber music for different ensembles. Some of them for bigger, some of them for smaller, and both of them, Daniel and Emmanuel, they were sort of explaining it and talking and have this conversation, and playing piece, rehearsing it a lot, performing it and explaining it. I think it was a marvelous thing, and there are really wonderful pieces were written for this. It was a real, I think, kind of a genius intuition to do this.
Absolutely. And as they say, the necessity is the mother of invention, because he was in the situation for the first time in his life, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where
he also taught, he teaches so much now. He made the master course on all the Beethoven piano sonata. It was about 20 different pianists who came from the whole world to do each one sonata, and did also with violin sonatas, now cello. So it is really, one has to give, and I think he knows very well, because he has already for so many years this West Eastern Divan and Academy. This is now what we can do. I mean, he can do it, of course.
That's a wonderful, wonderful way of sharing what you have. But I think coming back to what you were saying about Jerusalem Festival, it's very interesting, because I think there's a big change all over the world with with the social media onslaught, and especially on young people. This is something that you and I use it more, especially in the last year, because there was no other way to get some people together. But that's another thing. As a tool, I use it as a tool, but I don't spend so much time on it, because it's just takes over your life.
It eats up
Exactly.
everything.
It's up hours and hours of what I much rather do something else, something real. So, but young people, they're completely absorbed by this whole thing. They have a whole virtual world. Yeah. And I think that substitutes in terms of their, their activity and the attention span, and just they forget what it's like. And especially in the last year, how many people forgot what it's like to be involved in the real, in the real performance, where there's a great exchange of energy, warmth, emotions. Because, all of that, as wonderful as those devices are to keep in touch, ultimately it's exchange of information.
Ultimately you become lonely. It's just a recipe for loneliness, because this is not keeping in touch.
Exactly.
Well, in any case, this is I think I'm mostly sorry for those who never had the experience of this great public exchange. Those who just start now, they're just about to finish their studies, or just maybe to win some competition or whatever. They started their careers and immediately this. So they had no chance, and I just hope that soon it will come again, and these people can really discover a real world.
absolutely.
the
Well,
beauty
of
of
course,
this.
you've lived now in probably the most important cultural center in Europe, Berlin, which has
Yeah,
become so, so dynamic and so really a place, a summit of East and West in
absolutely. Yeah,
terms of, it's
yeah,
geographically, and it was historically because of East Berlin and West Berlin and so forth.
yeah.
So you've
Very
lived there
interesting.
for many, many years now, 30 years, yeah, as you said,
Almost,
91,
almost. Yeah, almost.
incredible. So how do you see the life in Berlin changed over these 30 years?
Yeah, let's forget now about COVID. Until, let's say, until about
Until
one and a
last
half
year,
year
yeah.
ago. Yes. Well, when I arrived here, we arrived in 1991, 92. And just after the wall came down and it was a reunification, it was a huge hype from one side and also a lot of problems because there were two worlds really were put together, practically uh, forced to live together. And it was
Yeah.
not so easy. It was not so easy for neither of them, especially for the East Germans who were, they didn't have trust. And also I must say there was this idea that everything was so much better in the West and we just take it over and somehow they will pass. But it was not true. And especially everything which to do with the culture. They had a fantastic theater. They had wonderful music, and they had those music schools which we are talking about. They had those music schools, and of course, as one of the first things they did, they closed them. So this was a victim, the first victim, one of the important victims of this reunification. So the first year,
Reunification.
yeah, it was gloomy. It was a little gloomy with a lot of hope. The city itself was, part of it was still, the same that it was in West Berlin, and the new city, let's say, in so-called Mitte and East Berlin, very gloomy, very dark. And then, I was coming from Paris, and I was really depressed in the beginning here, and I thought, wow, But I suppose, like, let's say, some necessity, I had more time for music. I had more time to practice. I had more time to have new ideas, and maybe even the creation of festival and something like this would not have happened if I were living still in Paris and having so much good time with my friends. Yes. Yes. So yeah. So then, it took about, I would say 7 years, 6 to 7 years. And suddenly it changed like this. All these things that were built on, and suddenly the city started growing together. And a lot of people came from outside. A lot of people found this incredible energy that the city gives attractive, also very cheap. It was, much cheaper than London, Paris, New York, much cheaper. So a lot of musicians, but also other cultural, people, from art, writers, everything. So let's say intelligentsia, what we call it. Everybody came here. So suddenly it was a very interesting, very, very interesting society. Very kind of all kind. So it was, it became this very special place. Now it's a little bit, I would say, this hype, maybe too much, went into the head of a lot of, of the city, let's say. And because the city is actually, I remember there was one of the mayors of the city who was always, said, we don't have this, but we are poor but sexy. That was a thing, sort of in Berlin, one couldn't get, there was no money for anything, but we were attractive. Yes, but now I don't think so. I am not so happy now, it's too much of this attitude that, anyway. But look, there are so many fantastic orchestras here. There are 3 opera houses. There are theaters, one better than the other. There are fantastic museums and great amount of exposition. A lot of really wonderful people living here. The only thing I'm regretting, and I think it's all over the world the same thing, that the arts don't have a real sort of community. That musicians are for the musicians. actors, or theater people with theater people, writers with writers, and so on, and visual arts with visual arts. So there is not this intercommunication
great synergy.
I think that could be more. I know it should be more. Yeah.
Again, trying to remember our sort of youth or childhood and then youth. I remember I had not only friends among musicians, but I had I loved theater. So современник
me
theater.
too. This is it.
When I was leaving, they came to me to say goodbye and say, please. They thought, of course, naively at that time, that one of the first people I will meet in America would be Solzhenitsyn. Good luck, he's in there. And it just says hello, but they were honest there, because his play almost was staged at the time, and it was of course canceled. And I said, well, when you see, it's not if you see, when you see Solzhenitsyn, so please.
Yes, yeah.
Later on, I became good friends with Ignat, of course, because a lovely man and a very, very nice.
Very
but
talented.
Of course, the man himself, it was easy to meet U.S. president than Solzhenitsyn.
Yes.
It's
no,
true.
But this is
and then the ballet dancers, and then the artists, the Messerer, all these people. It was, sometimes in the artist studio you could find classical musicians, ballet dancers, actors, writers, movie people. I mean, they were all somehow, when you went to one of those Rusa actors retreat,
that was one of these incredible things. This kind of house of creative
creativity. House of creativity. It's unbelievable.
Fantastic. It's unbelievable.
But they so many extraordinary people were there, just for vacation, or composers writing.
Yes.
When I tell them that Prokofiev was writing his Fifth Symphony in 1943 in Ivanovo, in a similar thing during the war. And across the field, in another dacha, Shostakovich was writing the Eighth Symphony, and Khachaturian was writing Gayane, and Kabalevsky was writing Kalabia, all at the same time.
All in Ivanovo. I've been to Ivanovo with my parents. I remember very well Ivanovo. Unbelievable, huh? Yeah,
unbelievable. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah, we are coming back to this social media world. Doesn't give you this, because they're too much. It's becoming narrow and narrow, and so the pianists are only watching the pianists who are doing this, and the violinists. There is this openness to arts. I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish it would be all different.
I wish it was different, but it's just so important that to have that synergy, between all these creative geniuses at that time, or just creative people just enjoying each other's company. There's a question here on YouTube. It's somebody I know who has a wonderful program herself in Spanish, Victoria Talks, and she's asking, from your point of view, why do these separations of artistic genre happen, and not only in Berlin? Obviously,
no, of course, no. It's all over the world.
Thank you very much. Why do you think?
I don't know, but this is a kind of an age of specialization now, as we're talking about specializing in one field. Very good, but it's also, I know it in medicine, it's also like this. There are very few, we call general practitioners now who understand and can do a diagnosis. You have to go to specialists, and the same thing with the culture. I suppose this is a zeitgeist now. Specializing.
Zeitgeist, just to be, in order to succeed, you need to just concentrate on a very narrow path and be a specialist it's very true. In my orchestra in America, in North Carolina, I have a wonderful friend, a Russian doctor who's been in America for 25 years. So he's an American doctor now, but he still has that Russian doctor's ethic, which means, the Chekhov ethics. When Chekhov as a doctor came to his village, he put the white flag up and never locked his door. So at any time, anybody who is unwell, 3 in the morning, you came to see him. That's a real country doctor. So this man saved so many of my soloists. I remember Volodya Feldsman came and he had some strange thing that a New York doctor couldn't do. I sent him at 10 at night to see my friend. And he said, "You've got shingles." And immediately gave him, you know, it's not a simple thing, but he's a great diagnostician. And he's just GP. He's GP.
Yeah. And you don't need to go to make a special scan for this, or to go, you know, it's a, this is the same story, but you know, this force course much more, this is more serious, but it's like this. I don't know. It's a great pity. I feel sorry that, you know, this is not like this anymore, because I have 2 wonderful grandchildren. There is 6 and 4.5, and they both start, And what kind of world, this kind of, so I now, just before we started doing, I was reading to them from the Greek mythology, which I adore, you know, and this is so I can see the interest, what I would like to, in many ways, that they should know about this, and how much from this history, from the myth, from the legends, from the, then they can go and start, listening to the Wagner operas, and they recognize the same people with different names, but the same gods, the same problems, and so on, of course. And so these connections between different things, one has to be able, ideally, to have schools, many schools where the young people are taught this. You cannot just do it. Somebody has to teach you for this, you know, but the music education cannot be just only the instrument. It has to give them the world.
Absolutely, and especially that we are practicing the art of the only known time travel instrument. That's the music, because immediately, as soon as you start, you know, playing, like last night I was playing Brahms sonatas, I mean, explaining to them what was 1953, his scherzo, which he wrote for Frei aber einsam. Exactly, it was one of the movements Schumann wrote to them. And so immediately they felt, and then we started to play with the first, even if I didn't tell them, they're immediately in the middle of the 19th century, in the very rarefied, a very special atmosphere.
It's like a salon for the clubs, for people.
Exactly. It's Robert Schumann in Dusseldorf. It's Johannes Brahms and Joseph Joachim, and of course Clara, the great news. So immediately, you don't need to tell them the form of the music, nothing. Just put it in context, and that's it. And with the time travel, we're there, you know. And then the first sonata was already 20-some years later. So that's a different, and so forth. This is the time travel, the only known to me, you know, the boom, and we are immediately transported. And yet it's as relevant today, maybe even more, because it expresses the emotion.
Have you been in Leipzig to the Mendelssohn house? Yes. Have you ever been? Yeah. So they restored this Mendelssohn house with a salon, which you also have a feeling that on this parquet, there was Schumann, Clara Schumann, Mendelssohn, Fanny Mendelssohn, young Brahms, you know, the Joachim, they all came here, and even Wagner. So it was unbelievable. And I would like to create something there. I hope it will be something like a salon like this, one can invite people of all all the departments of arts and culture to do something. I was named the president of this place, you know, of the Mendelssohn Foundation, which I don't know why me and why, but I'm tremendously proud and tremendously it's humbled by this. But so I need also all kind of ideas and all kind of interesting input. So you could also help me to.
You can always count on me. He is the one composer I adore. I think more than anybody else. I think he was an angel.
Personality. He was an angel. He was an angel, but he was also one of these people who connected the past with the future, and who was so generous to everybody. So this is a good example of this person who connects people. You know, connected arts, connected times. This is what we need.
Exactly. Yeah. He didn't have to be you know, he was an evolutionist, not a revolutionist. He didn't
No,
try
but
to destroy or create. But he connected, and he made, just for making Bach's music,
yeah,
bringing back to life. Already in every city that respects Johann Sebastian Bach should be
yeah.
a statue of Mendelssohn.
Statue of
Just for
Mendelssohn
that.
should be there, you know. But this
Just
is
for that.
yeah,
Just for that.
yeah.
And then he,
Very
you
nice.
know, Schubert symphonies, which Schubert
Yeah,
never heard. Schubert
yeah,
never heard a single symphony in
yeah.
his lifetime,
No,
and
no,
so
but this
forth.
is I have
So
discovered
for
for myself
Mendelssohn,
also. Yeah, I discover for myself
yeah,
the beauty of this person and the genius, you know, not only musical but also this genius of the person who did so much for all of us.
yeah,
Without whom we would be much poorer.
and probably because he lived such a intense, incredibly busy life, because he was promoting the music of the others, Niels
Yeah,
Gade, this whole circle, you know,
really.
in this Zumarabische cafe house
Yeah,
where they all gathered together, the
yeah,
David Bündlers, you know, there with
yes,
Schumann,
yes.
Leipzig, right there.
Leipzig.
I
Oh
ate
my
there
God.
in the place of Mendelssohn, where the hook,
Yes.
you know, for their coats, it says
Yeah.
Mendelssohn, and next to it, of course, was Schumann and so forth.
Amazing, huh?
And it's quite exciting. It's
It's
still
amazing.
there.
It's an amazing
Still
place.
there.
So there are some places like this, and I think one should go maybe back to this format, not too huge, but to try to get people thinking about this, thinking what can one be doing, you know, like giving it so much, you know, to public, to younger people, to everybody who wants to do it, to find solutions and to think about it, talk about it. It's a very interesting place.
It's a fantastic position that you have. I once opened a plug in London, which was on the wall of, believe it or not, of the bank we used to have an account just in Victoria. He stayed in this house, and
Yeah.
they wanted to dedicate, you know, a special plaque, and they invited me, and I gave a speech and even played inside of the bank a little bit. And I said, well, Mendelssohn is a great example of how banking, because his father was a banker, and music and genius can coexist and profit.
And philosophy, because of
know.
his grandfather, you know, it's all
Exactly, of Moses.
Yes.
Exactly. Because he should have been the most spoiled rich brat, because he had the music played, everything he wrote from the age of 12, his father paid for the musicians to go. That's why he became at 16 unsurpassed genius, including Mozart. Nobody wrote like his octet. It's unrivaled. At that age,
it's unbelievable.
It's just that.
But he was also one of the first Europeans. He was a European. You see, he lived there, everywhere, and he was this, you know, person connecting this culture. It is really very, very important to really to give the justice to his memory, and also to see where are the people like this. Nobody, we are not Mendelssohns, no, but you know, to try to create something.
Yeah. Another question from this, and then soon I'll let you go. I know you've got grandchildren.
No, that's okay.
This is good. Don't you think that the musical educational system should change, since we're living in the time when young people see the world different, more individualistic and less curious? Curious is a very important point. So basically the question is, don't you think that the musical educational system should change?
The problem it's a big question, you know, we could spend hours on it. The problem is that it shouldn't be changed, it should be created again. There is no musical education for, let's say, non-musicians, and this should be done in order to get them to know it, at least, you know, to love it and to respect it, not to become musicians, but to appreciate it, you know. No school now has a real music education. There is, here's my husband, he did here a wonderful project with a musical kindergarten. This is where one has to start. Musical kindergarten, where they have a music as a part of their normal routine. They don't make them practice, not at all. But the musicians come, they play everything, they play instruments a little bit, they sing. They have a music as a part of their everyday life. And then I know that they made a poll, and that is apparently over 80% of these kids continue doing music later. So we have to, somebody, I don't know who, but each one who can do something has to do it, because I think the music education doesn't exist. And it should exist. It makes people better. It makes kids better. It makes then young people, teenagers, which are difficult time and so on, a little much better. They are better off, and they are better for the society. And so I don't know why it is so that no politician in the world is sort of they know about it, but nobody gives the real sort of, it has to be a law. They should teach it like they teach languages, literature, mathematics.
Political will and a vision of what's
it's very important. It's not only money, it's political will.
Yeah, because we know that, from history, that the reason, Beethoven, who was the first professional composer who could live off the publishing of his works, but who bought his works, who performed? Professionals? Not at all.
No.
The doctors, the lawyers, they bought, and that's why he would always reduce it to a very small ensemble, or just for piano, violin, piano, because those were the amateurs. They were the ones who kept it going, and we need an army of educated, enlightened amateurs. We don't need more professionals. We have more professionals than we can employ. We need people who love music, because amateur, that means you
lover. Music.
Exactly.
But this
amateur
is,
is not a bad word.
No, we have to really, I mean, this question was how to change music education. In order to change it, one has to have it. Then we can talk about changing it. But unfortunately, it practically doesn't exist. And this is where one has to do something to start doing something, because I know that a lot of the kids are so receptive to it. For them, it should be becoming normal that they have music. It's normal. It's like breathing. That's how it should be.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's how we grew up. For us, music was not a choice.
But we were lucky. That also.
We were the air we were breathing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But we were lucky.
That's why. That's why people don't quite understand. They don't quite understand why in the pandemic, where we're suffering, not even people like you and me, not so much for practical reasons. We just suffer from, like, the air has been taken out, because for us to perform, to exchange, to perform for people, it's like oxygen. It's not a question of whether we make a living out of it. No, we'd be thrilled to play for nothing, just for live people.
That's what we do now. During this year, mostly we did whatever one could do. It was, of course, for nothing, because it was to keep us going. It's like we were like, for example, a beautiful watch, but which one had to, not a digital watch, but one has to do it.
Yeah,
so if you don't do this, it goes. We're dead. So we need to do it.
And so,
because we want to share. This is our thing. We want to give, to share, and if one doesn't let us do it, it's difficult, very difficult.
We just we like flowers. We just sort of wilted flowers. Yeah, but it's so important for the young ones. And the last question I will ask you: what do you think this pandemic taught us, and what lessons we can have, and how can we make our environment both creative and just in general, what lessons we take from this, and what we would like to forget, which we had before. Some things we'll have to forget because the travel is becoming so complicated. I'm about to leave this Friday and so forth. It's just a nightmare, but still it's better than the alternative. So I'm still going through it. But of course, because that's how we always been.
Anything.
It's not a question. Yeah. But what's your sort of overview after 14 months now of the pandemic, almost 14 months?
Not over. It's not over. I think how important it is, this direct contact. You know, I'm not a believer in lockdown from the point of view of sort of to lessen the contact. I don't believe it. And I saw my father who really died from solitude. There is absolutely nothing to say about it. For me, this is it. You know, you cannot keep people alone for any virus. And so he would be happier to die from the virus, I tell him, because it was terrible. This loneliness, for me, it was like a wake up. I wouldn't realize anything is better. One has to be intelligent and one keep everything, you know, as much as one can, but one cannot stop people from seeing other people and to seeing family and to make music. That was it. That was it, you know. So I don't think it taught us anything good. I am not a believer in this, oh, it's so good, now we know better. We don't know better. Nobody knows better. It was a horrific experience. It is horrific experience. And I'm very happy to be here with you. We can talk. Of course, we have those means, but it is not a real sort of, it's not a real, you know, the other day it was really, I saw it. I heard it. Daniel was giving an interview to somebody and said to me, so what do you think? Is it an alternative, this internet online, is it alternative to the real music concerts? And he said, no, it's like if you love somebody, this is a video. And if you meet a person in life, this is a real thing. So it's like a difference. Exactly. You can't. Absolutely. This is it. But I think this is, I cherish even more the contacts, the direct contact with people. I love to see my friends and I like, you know, and to see my family, and I spend more time with them now. This is probably one good side of it. But otherwise, no, I just hope that soon it is over and we will have again life of the musician, and we will be able to, you know, to give what we can do to other people. This is what we are here for, to make other people, to give them joy.
Yeah,
I know.
And to see them, to talk to them, to observe, you know, to touch their hands.
Of course, it's
you know, to test each other's temperature, emotional temperature, where you are and what's important and how is the state of your soul, the state of your spirit.
I just want to come back for once to Jerusalem when you said to me what was so important about this festival. And for all of us who goes there, I don't know if you have this, but I always had this feeling here I am doing something for these people, not for myself. I love to do it. I love to play concerts. It's always this beautiful hall here, success. For this, all of us had this feeling we are doing something really for people. It's something good that we are doing, because I could feel this from the public, the reaction. One could almost feel them breathing with us together. And this is like nothing. Nothing is like this in the world. This is amazing. That's why we all still love to go there and to play for these people who are hungry for this, who need it, and who are grateful. And we are grateful to them, but they're grateful. You know what I mean? It is a chain. It's like this. It's an exchange. Yeah.
Besides, I remember when I came to, every time I come to Jerusalem, but when especially I came to your festival, and I came with my dear late uncle, who I, of course, adored. And he was a very special trip for him because he reunited with his closest friend, Garik Sasonsky, who came to all the concerts. You remember. Anyway, but every time when you look just across the valley to the old city of Jerusalem, ever since even if you completely
miss the heart beat, you know, it's like
you feel closer to God, even if you are agnostic and non-believer, but you do feel closer. There is something there which is quite special.
So Dima, in September, I hope to see you there.
Absolutely. Yes. But I hope to see you also in a few weeks in Moscow.
I hope so too.
If everything goes well. If everything goes
exactly.
Well.
We like this. We cannot plan more than a week, but we hope.
No, but we hope. We
the
hope
last one to
it's
die.
on the agenda. It's on the agenda.
Dimichka, it was
Well,
wonderful
thank you.
to talk to you. Wonderful
Great
to talk
to
to you.
talk to
And
you.
thank you for inviting me to this chat.
Oh,
It was just a
it's
pleasure. We should do it more often, even without YouTube, just for us.
absolutely, absolutely. But you remember many lunches and dinners we always had tete-a-tete. Most of the
Dima,
time we were just
I
laughing.
never laugh with anybody like I laugh with you. I know it. I remember that a couple of times I was just, I couldn't even sit straight. I hope we will resume.
It's ready anytime. Anytime. And I hope to do it in Moscow next time, and then maybe
Yes.
in Berlin, because Julie and I are supposed to go to Dresden at the end of June. Maybe we'll come to Berlin just
please,
to visit.
let me know.
Yeah, or
Let
Leipzig, we could go to Mendelssohn. It's all very near.
Mendelssohn, yes, of course, to Leipzig is all very near. It's 1 hour from here.
Very near.
I'm going on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Thank you
that's
so much.
Fantastic. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, dear.
very much to everybody who's participated. This is my last of 18 programs. Now I'm going on the road, and I'm going to forget about Zoom for a while, I hope. But I will have, of course, reruns of the program either every Sunday or whatever. But after a while, I will come back. I'm very determined to do things live, as we were talking about. But thank you so much, Lana. It was
thank
great.
you, Dimitrys. Thank you so much, dear. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
See you
Bye.
very, very soon.
Bye.